double header today. The first thing is the consequences of the Berlin blockade / airlift. And then we're going to look at who was to blame for the Cold War. And it's such an important topic that we're going to delve into today and polish off on Monday, because it's often the question that's worth the most marks on your paper. Almost always, in fact, when you look back at past papers. So we've got to crack this one. Who was most to blame, or what events were most to blame for causing the most tension? So the consequences of the Berlin blockade. Well, I've got three you're going to look at. Comic-Con, NATO, Federal, and the development of the two Germanys. So after this blockade, after everything had fallen through for the Soviets, and after almost a year of Berlin being cut off by the Soviets, there were a number of consequences. Maybe the biggest, that's not actually on the board for you to look at, is that it was clear that relations between the West and the Soviet Union had completely broken down. Before 1949, the Berlin blockade, there was still sort of a semblance of some sort of friendship, if you like. There was some hints that they were trying to make it look like on the face of it they were trying to get along. But after this, it was like the gloves were off. We're clearly disagreeing fundamentally, massively on certain issues. So that was kind of the sign. Cold War is definitely on, because that was the first main confrontation, if you like. So after this, the Western European states were feeling a little bit vulnerable after what the Soviet Union did to Berlin. And so they looked to the United States for some sort of guarantee of safety. Because, of course, many of the Western European nations were really struggling in terms of their economies and money and things after the Second World War. And America was the only country with the money and maybe the will to want to help those countries out. So they formed NATO, which was a defensive alliance. Defensive means if one of them were attacked, all of the rest of them would join in to defend that one particular nation. And America would head up NATO. NATO's been in the news recently because Donald Trump's been saying that he don't really feel it with NATO. He might want to get rid of it, or he might want to make other people pay more to the upkeep of NATO. Which tells you that America was the main financial contributor to the NATO alliance, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The other thing is that the two Germanys, which until this point it was sort of seen that once the peace settlement had been signed with Germany and things had died down a bit, those 4 zones of Germany and 4 zones of Berlin might be all reunited again as one. But this incident, the Berlin blockade, showed that those two countries, well, they weren't countries by this, but those 2 zones of Germany were completely different. One side was being turned communist, the other side was being turned capitalist, and they'd had this big confrontation over Berlin and the Berlin blockade. They were never going to be reunited in that immediate future because there were communist leaders in control in the east and capitalist leaders in control in the west. So, first of all, the 3 zones, American, British and French, which they'd already joined together into a trizonia, formed a brand new country called the Federal Republic of Germany, FRG, Federal Republic of Germany. In response to that, and shortly afterwards, the Soviet Union and their zone created the Democratic Republic of Germany. So Germany split into 2 countries. Big consequence. And then lastly, the Soviets tried to formalise their control of Eastern Europe economically by creating something called Comic-Con, which was an economic alliance of states. Basically, it was the communist countries would trade with each other, and they agreed to trade agreements, and they would help each other out to some extent, but not trade so much with capitalist countries. And effectively, it wasn't a team thing. It wasn't Comic-Con, all these like Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, now East Germany, or the Democratic Republic of Germany, and all of those different countries in Eastern Europe. It wasn't like a team thing. It was basically, this is what the Soviet Union says we're going to do, so they all did it. Because, of course, the Eastern European governments were puppet governments. So whatever Soviet Union told them to say, that's what they said. That's what puppet government means. So there's the consequences of the Berlin blockade. Now, in the double lesson on Monday, I'll make you a video about why the Cold War happened, and you can delve into that a little bit more, but we're going to do this after we've got the consequences of the Berlin blockade. So there we go. We're going to assess in the rest of this lesson whether it was the United States mostly at fault for causing the tension of the Cold War, or whether it was the Soviet Union.